So everyone knows this was not all me. Judy, Hijama, and I spent one day making noodles together, which was so much fun. Judy made pies. Sherry up there made pies. The guys helped me peel potatoes. My girls, and it wasn't just me. So I'm so thankful for this church and, everyone in it. And I'm so thankful we get to be here. And all of you, you just look so beautiful. I'm so glad we're here. And I'm so thankful for Laurie. She was going to try and be with us 3 years ago. Yeah. So she's here with us tonight in her wonderful story and journey. And so it's your turn. And you're all fancy and lit up.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll warn you though, I am not a speaker. I can tell you what God has done for me, but that's about it. I'm not a speaker, so don't have too high hopes on me. This is not my thing. I'm out of my comfort zone. I like to tell people, if you feel God is trying to lead you towards something, just do it. Don't make him force you into it. Just do it. Even if it's something little. So my cousin posted on my Facebook page one time, and as soon as I read it, I thought, this is me. What you're seeing is simply a weak person with a very strong God, because I wouldn't be here without him. And I mean, he's done so many things for me. It's literally hard to believe how it all kind of worked. For me, God has really shown me that his timing, it's all set up, it's just right. Your life's going to go. As the Bible says, he knows your beginning, your middle, and your end. And this happened with a combine accident in September 18th of 18, and which I later found out, so maybe she was the one helping me that day. I later found out that my grandma would have been 129 that day. She died when I was 2 or 3, so I didn't really know her. But I found it odd it was on her birthday. I literally just found that out like a couple months ago. But laying there, I just, my brother-in-law was on the phone with 911. I was laying there looking up at this beautiful blue sky. And I literally had a conversation. I could hear my great uncle, who was an old Southern Baptist preacher. I don't know how many times I've heard him say, God knows your beginning, your middle, your end, and he knows how many hairs you have on your head. And I knew that. I could hear him saying that in my ear. I looked up and I go, okay, God, you'll carry me through it? Forward. Not looking back. My aunt, after I was in the hospital, probably about 3 or 4 days, she said something about questioning. And I looked at her, and I'm like, it never dawned on me till that second. I never questioned it. God has your story already made out. I actually told somebody, I said, it's a good thing it happened like this, because otherwise it could have happened in a car crash and it would have messed up my pretty face. I call this cut and done, it was just over very quickly. Matter of fact, I ran into one of my first responders a year later, and I'm like, I have to apologize to you. And he goes, what do you have to apologize to us for? And I said, I remember being in the ambulance and saying, they were like, we have to drill a hole in your leg. We need to get medicine to you, and it's the quickest way and the fastest way to do it. We drill a hole in your leg, and we shoot it in your bone. I go, okay, just do it. And they had to cut my jeans. And I'm like, oh man, these are my good jeans though. And a year later, when I meet him, I'm like, I am so sorry. One leg was already gone. They were all literally already destroyed anyway. What was I thinking? I says, it was another blonde/senior moment. I just didn't even think of it at the time, but I was like, man, you gotta cut them. The leg's missing. Duh. What difference does it make now? So I had to be put into a pickup truck to get out of the field, then an ambulance to go 1 mile, then to a helicopter. So when the first responders got there, I literally wasn't out until they put me out for surgery. I was awake the whole time. And first responders got there, and I can still picture their face. They lean over me, and they're like, she's not bleeding. What do we do now? The look on their face when they realized I wasn't bleeding. So our combine literally saved my life. A lot of combines just chop the corn off. Ours twisted. So it basically twisted it off and closed it up. And I have to add that, so my cousin, 16 years before my accident, lost his arm up at the shoulder. He lost part of his hip and the back of his heel. And his was another farming accident. And when he got out of surgery, the surgeon come out, told his mom, because this was out in the middle of nowhere. This is in Arkansas. There's no cell service. There's no nothing. So he literally picked up his arm, got on the tractor, pulled out of the field, closed it up so the cows wouldn't get out, and headed down the road. And ran into a nurse whose phone did work. So they flew him out. But his surgeon come out and told his mom, who had previously lost her youngest son in a semi-accident that was killed. And the surgeon came out and told her, he goes, I can't explain it, but when his arm was cut off, it pulled the major artery out, and it snapped back in a knot. That's why he didn't bleed to death. So, and again, his family is like mine. We grew up in church. God is all we knew. And I think it's just proof that he watches over us. When it's your time, it's your time. But when it's not, it's not. You're going to sit here as long as, I had an aunt that couldn't figure out why she was still here. And right before she died, she was there for our cousin, who was way younger than her, probably by 20 years, who passed away in the nursing home. And if it hadn't been for her, he would have died alone. And I honestly think God had her there for that reason. Because she didn't have to die alone either. She got to actually go home with her daughter and die. But I think she was there because of him. God just, he lines everything up. 2 months before my accident, so I was hiking the Appalachian Trail 100 miles every year. And 2 months before my accident, me and my son hiked the hardest section of the Appalachian Trail. We did 115 miles. And it was literally scaling rocks the whole time. We probably, out of 115 miles, probably 8 of that was literal trail walking. The rest of it was scaling rocks up and down, which, needless to say, I couldn't do that now. But I am so thankful I got to see that. And 1 month before the accident, me and my husband finally got to do our dream trip to Alaska for 2.5 weeks. Again, I wouldn't have been able to walk on a glacier like I did if he'd have done this before. But he didn't. I really think, I don't know, I guess I just feel like God gave me the chance to do some of the stuff I wanted to do before this happened. He just, I don't know. I guess unless you grow up with Christ in your life, you understand when the time comes that, wow, God was watching over me. That this worked out the way it should have. This was just, and the other reason is her. She's been my prayer warrior ever since. She's a retired farmer who kept sending me cards once a week. And I finally wrote her back. I'm like, do you know me? I would ask everybody, my father-in-law, my cousins, I'd ask everybody, do you know a Carolyn Weldy? No. And finally I write this sweet woman back. And I says, this is my phone number. So she calls me up. She goes, first thing out of her mouth, no, you don't know me. Now we're like, we hardly go 2 days without, you need to pray for this person. You need to pray for this person. This is what's going on. We're constantly on each other. And she definitely helped me get through this. When you have that many prayers said about you, churches from Missouri to California, Florida, I was getting cards from people I don't even know, like her. And it was so funny because she never put it in her card. Most of the cards I get, you don't know me, but. You wouldn't believe how many times I've seen that sentence. And I literally just read through all my cards again 3 or 4 months ago. I don't know, I was just in the mood. So I started reading some of them. And it's amazing what a card can do to boost your spirits and just help you get through whatever you're going through. When I was in the hospital, it was probably about the 4th day or so. It was just me and my husband, and this was the first time I cried. And I says, you know what I'm dreading? And he looks at me, he's like, what? And I said, I'm dreading when you really see me, And he looked at me, no hesitation. He's like, I don't care what you look like. He goes, just don't leave me alone. And we spent our 35th anniversary in Alaska. So after 35 years, I did get the right guy. If he stands by this, he's a keeper. But your family's everything. And he has just stood by me through thick and thin. And I have met so many amputees that have lost a spouse over half a leg. Come on, really? I was telling my husband the other day about a lady, and her husband left her, and she was like venting in our group. And I told my husband, he goes, seriously? Half a leg? That's what he's worried about? I'm like, I'm glad I got you. But, your family makes a world of difference. My brothers, I've got 4 older brothers, 3 living. 1 passed away of cancer 20-some years ago. But my oldest brother, was in the hospital room at the time, and my husband is telling me how when I was in surgery that first night that 2 different times, 2 different nurses came up and thought he was my dad. And my son was my husband, because he came in on a train from Chicago. And he looks at me and goes, do I look that bad? I go, no, you were probably really stressed out and tired. I says, no, you don't look that bad. And my kids have baby faces, so they both have beards, so they look older than they are. And I looked at my oldest brother, and I looked at him, I poofed myself up, and I'm like, I look good even cut in half. And he goes, don't say that. I go, but I do. And now my youngest brother, I now have sort of a nickname. I'm their half-sister. You got to understand, in my family, we get the video camera first and the first aid kit second. You got to have it all on tape. We find a way to laugh about everything, literally everything. And I also found out when I was in the hospital that God has a huge sense of humor. So I was only in the hospital 2.5 weeks total. A week of that was physical therapy. And the night before I started physical therapy, they came in and said, told me what was going to happen. They go, now, I'm going to warn you. You're going to see yourself in the mirror, and you're going to break down. It's okay. Everybody does. Don't worry about it. So I'm dwelling on this, and my sister-in-law and my aunt were in the hospital room at 9 o'clock that night, and they were getting ready to leave, and I said, you guys, you two need to pray for me. I says, I haven't broke down yet, and I don't intend to start tomorrow. So I says, you need to pray for me to get through rehab and get through that mirror, okay? They're like, we got you, Laurie, we got you. I was like, okay. And so the next morning, they're like, okay, how do you brush your teeth? How do you do this? And I turn around, and there's a mirror right in my bathroom, and I didn't know that. I turned around, and the only thing I could see was this hair. It was like sticking up all over the place. It hadn't been washed, and that's what bothered me. I'm like looking in the mirror, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I'm like, okay, Lord, I get it. You got me through it. Let's go. Move on. I'm like, you just made my hair bad enough so I wouldn't feel bad about the rest of it, I still literally look in the mirror and think, oh, Laurie, what'd you do, It's like, and almost every night after, we watch TV, I'm in my recliner, the wheelchair's off to the side, it's bedtime, shut the TV off, I grab the wheelchair, and I still think every night when I grab that wheelchair, I did not know that's what this life was going to end up being. This was not what my retirement was supposed to be. And I wasn't supposed to be retired yet either, but, there's that. But I'd like to think that I've helped a few people along the way with my story. I was at a Methodist church in Plymouth that when I spoke there, she picked out a certain song that the choir sang to me. I had never heard the song before, but I bawled. Because it hit home. And she told me, she says, I thought of you when I heard this song. And it was by Casting Crowns. I'm surprised I hadn't heard it before. But it was called Nobody. And it's about, don't worry about, I'm nobody. Don't worry about me. It's Jesus. And don't worry about remembering my name. You need to remember Christ's name. Remember Jesus' name. Because without him, I wouldn't be here. I mean, when I was in the ER, I got to the ER and I had 2 Afghan trauma surgeons that were there on call. And they told my husband, it's like an IUD. This is nothing new. We're going to be fine. When he introduced himself, that he was an Afghan trauma surgeon, I leaned back, oh, you know what you're doing. Let's go. I'm ready. Let's go. Come on. I literally told him that. He cracks up every time he talks to me. And I've had 2 of my doctors reach out to me to talk to 4 new amputees, which makes my day, that they think little old me can do them any good. I think they figure I look worse than they do, so, if I can stand up in front of them, then they realize they can too, that they can get back up and keep going, and life moves on. God just will pick the way you go through the story you're supposed to have, and whether it's a stomach ache or surgery, you just got to know he's going to carry you through it. As long as you trust in that, he will. Trust me. He will carry you through anything. I met a woman at another church that I spoke at, and after I got done, she says, I got to tell you, she goes, I never looked at it the way you look at it, that this is the order it's supposed to happen in. She says, I got cancer, and as I was going through cancer, my son got cancer, and her husband passed away, all in a 9-month period. And then her son died. But she told me, she says, she goes, I never looked at it the way you did, as this is lined up the way it's supposed to happen. And she says, if it hadn't happened the way it did, she says, because my son seen how I got through my cancer with Christ, he was saved and went to heaven when he died. And she says, I feel so much better thinking that that's why God had it happen like that. And she goes, I never looked at it that way. She goes, she actually told me, she says, I feel like there's a weight lifted off. Because she goes, I think you were here for me to help me understand a little better why her story ended the way it did. Because she says, now I know I'm going to see my son again. She goes, I'm actually happy about it now. And matter of fact, I owe her a letter. Now that I'm talking about her, we've still stayed in touch. I have, well, her I literally stayed in touch with. But I have several people now I try and stay in touch with because they've touched my life. I mean, Carolyn has definitely touched my life more than humongous. But God will just it's amazing how he can carry you through things. I wanted a microprocessor knee, and so I went back in my socket, when they built so I'm a hip disarticulation. We make up 1% of all the amputees. That's how rare we are. So most people have a stump that they put a socket in like this. I don't have anything. So my leg is connected to me with a belt. I am lucky. I ate more tonight than I usually do because, for starters, it was really good. But you can't overeat when you've got this belt that is just so tight because you can't have any friction with this leg that you're swinging in and out all the time. So I had to go back for a new socket because when they built it, I was still swollen from surgery. My accident was in September. The first time I walked was Valentine's Day in February. And so I was still swollen. So it didn't fit anymore, so I had to get a new one. Well, I got the new leg, Medicare paid for it. I couldn't walk on it. I literally couldn't last 5-10 minutes. I was in so much pain, it was awful. And I missed the first church on an Easter Sunday in 20. And me and my husband had to take my son to the airport. And with COVID and all, we were like, let's find somewhere else to go eat. So we found a random diner, went in. If I'd have been 5 minutes later, I wouldn't have met this lady. We walked in, sat down. This lady was leaving. She walks up to me and she says, wow, she goes, you walk really good for a hip disarticulation. I looked at her, I'm like, I knew she had a prosthetic leg. I'm like, how do you know I'm a hip disarticulation? She goes, because I am. So we're really rare. So to run into another one is like out of this world, especially at a random diner. And she says, have you reached out to the Amputee Coalition? It's a nonprofit organization. And I said, oh, yeah, they sent me this whole big thing on just my type of amputation and all this. She goes, oh, good, good. She goes, I'm the founder. And I go, wait, what? God put me in a place to meet the founder of the Amputee Coalition. And so I was constantly texting her and emailing her, asking her questions and stuff, and she knew I was having issues with the new leg and the new socket. And in August, August, she says, hey, she goes, I'm starting a new leg. She goes, I'm in Joliet. If you want to come here, maybe we can help you and figure out what's wrong with why you can't use it. And I said, I'll be there. So I went there. So this is how I ended up with my new prosthetic doctor. And when he made the new socket his way, I'm like, wow, okay, this, if you can call it comfortable. Because basically I sit in a U-joint. My hip goes in a U-joint. And so I says, okay. And he says, he goes, I know you like a prosthetic doctor, but if you give me a chance, he goes, let me build you one of mine. We'll do a test socket for free. If you don't like it, go home, no problem. I said, okay, yeah, I'll try it. I loved it. I'm like, yeah, I want this socket. He goes, okay. And so I went back. He started the socket. He goes, I'm going to warn you. He says, you have the wrong parts. You've got the wrong hip, the wrong knee, and the wrong foot for your high of an amputation. I just looked at him. He goes, we'll try it. Let's see how it goes. And I go, okay. And one of the issues I was having was the knee. I felt like I was going to fall. And I looked at him. I go, is that normal? And he just shook his head. He goes, no. He goes, that's why that knee doesn't belong on you. He says, it will drop you. It will let you go. I'm like, okay. I go, Medicare's not paying for another one. I said, so we'll go with the old mechanical leg back on there again and see how it works. He goes, well, let me look in my lab and see what I can find. I said, okay. And as I'm leaving that night at his doctor's office at 8:30 at night, mind you, and he's still working on other patients, he says, Laurie, I got a foot. And I'm like, okay, I'll see you in the morning. So the next morning I go back, and his office is very different. He has 2 rooms that are private, but pretty much everybody just sits out in the living room, and we converse, advice, encourage, suggest. You got problems? What do? You know, that's that kind of it's a whole nother family. It really is. It's amazing. So I go and I sit down. And he walks up to me with this hip and knee. And I'm looking at him thinking, he found the parts. And he says, I need to tell you a little story. I go, okay. He goes, so he says, in July, I had a patient, no, June. He said, in June, I had a patient come, and we were working with the leg. While she was here testing it out, she is from Minnesota, so she's staying in a hotel, her and her husband. While she was testing out the leg, her cancer came back, which is how she lost her leg. And she had like 4 tumors inside her hip that she was trying to walk on, basically. And she had to go across the street to the hospital for a few days. She came back, said, going home. He goes, do you want to walk on this leg before you go? She goes, yes. And so he put her in the leg. She walked in it and went home. That night before I came back for that morning, the night before, her husband reached out to him and said, Diana passed away. Do you have anybody that can use her leg? And so he told him about me. And he said, she's perfect. Give her Diana's leg. The leg is still at the office. She didn't even get to take it home. And I bawled. I couldn't believe it. And my friend that was with me at the time, I just looked at her crying. I go, I feel so stupid. She goes, why? I said, because last night I woke up at 3 o'clock, and I said, God, you got to make this old mechanical leg work on that new socket. It's got to work. And what did he do? He gave me a whole new leg. And she looks at me, she goes, Laurie, she goes, what does the Bible tell you? It says he knows what you need before you ask it. He said, Laurie, just trust he knows what you need. I said, yeah, but obviously I didn't have enough trust because I prayed for the other one. I didn't pray for this one. And she just said, Laurie, he went above and beyond for you, as he usually does. I said, yeah, he did. So this leg on the side of it says Diana Johnson. I put it in memorial of her, and I'm hoping to meet the family. She literally had to say goodbye to 2 little boys and a 4-year-old daughter. She was very creative, which is part of my lights. And the fact that at Christmas time when I had them lit up, and she was there with me, I proved to her. I told her, I says, I'm keeping it lit up all year round now. She goes, why? I says, because people talk to me. They're like, oh, cool lights. Oh, I love your leg. And Diana was a very creative person, I found out. So that's the other reason I do it for her. And June has to look like a birthday. Because our birthdays, believe it or not, me and Diana, our birthdays are only a few days apart, which I find really odd. And then her husband told me, he says, he goes, I can't wait to tell her dad that you're getting her leg. I go, she was saving it for the memorial to tell everybody who was getting her leg, because she grew up a farmer. And he knew that her dad would like that it was going to another farmer and an outdoor person that still gets out there. I've hiked in Colorado with my old leg, which it was mechanical, which means I had to do everything. This one, I literally have to make it bend. So it has never dropped me. The other one, not so much. I used to fall quite a bit. I got good at falling, though, luckily. But this one helps hold me up, so I'm hoping hiking will be a little better with it. I ended up getting back in the tractor a year after my accident. I still run the grain cart. I'm actually hoping either this fall we're changing a piece of equipment so that I can get back in the disc again. I really miss discing. It's so nice. It's back before my accident, I used to walk around the neighborhood all the time. And that was my God time. That was my prayer time. I would just literally pray the 3 or 4 miles, whatever it is I walked. And when I'm in the tractor, my grandpa was a farmer, so that's kind of puts me close to him, and it's just it's kind of my prayer time, my me time. And so I kind of miss that all-day thing, And so I'm looking forward to getting back. I just found that out yesterday, that I might get to go disc again. So I'm really excited about that. Vocational rehab helps any type of, and I don't want to say handicapped person, because I know a girl that has seizures that they help be able to, like they gave me a roll-in shower. They took all my carpeting out. Have you ever pushed a wheelchair on carpeting? Try doing it with one hand and one leg. Oh my gosh. I basically have, my knee's better than it was now that I don't have the carpet, but they took all the carpeting out. I've literally wore down every joint I have but this one, including my neck. I literally have to use my neck to pick myself up. And because I don't have any kind of stub or residual limb, I tip over really easily. You don't believe how many times I've tipped over. My husband had to help me get out of the recliner one time because I tipped over that way and my arm was trapped, so I couldn't even get my arm to help me get up. And yeah, you tip over really easily. It's the pits. But it has its own little problems. The worst thing is, like, if I do decide I want to put shorts or something on, and I've got to get the leg in. It's a whole to-do to wear shorts or pants. But my husband has to check the back end of me to make sure my seam's right, because I can't tell if they're on straight. I only got one thing that goes through one hole, so it's just like, is it straight? It don't feel right. I can tell by the front it don't feel right. It's like, it's always the little things that get me. But I also like to have fun with it. I had a little girl last week that I could hear her still asking questions as her mom's walking away, because she looks at me and she goes, "What happened to your arm?" And the mom was just devastated. I go, "Oh, I'm glad you asked." I said, "I had an accident." She pulls up her sleeves. "I got 2 hands." Like, "You do?" I said, "You hang on to those." "Oh, yeah, I'll keep them. I'll keep them." I said, "Okay." But I heard, as they finally walked away, I heard the little girl say, "But she has the other one." So she couldn't figure out why the other one wasn't there. And plus, I didn't even have this on, so it was just, hanging there. But it's like, I love kids. Kids crack me up. They're so much fun. They just, oh my gosh. I had one that came up to me and says, Did a shark take your leg? I go, "Yeah." "Did it take your arm too?" I go, "Yeah." Oh, we had at least a 45-minute conversation. We were at a place where we were sitting, so she was stuck with me for a while. But it's just, kids are just fun. I've only scared 2. The lights help with that too, let me say. The lights help with that too. One little boy, I was going out, he was coming in, and he's looking at me. I go, "Is it scary or is it cool?" He goes, "No, it's scary." I go, "I'm sorry, I'm not trying to scare you." One little boy completely avoided me on the street. Unfortunately, his daddy caught him and dragged him back to apologize. I'm like, "No, no, no, no." I looked at, "You don't have to be sorry. Don't worry about it." But, I think it's good for kids to know it's okay. I love it when people, and that's what the point is with the lights. People talk to me now. They'll ask me questions, which I love. I mean, that's how people, and especially kids, learn that this stuff happens. Matter of fact, that little girl that I just told you about, I told her, I just said accident, I'm like, "So if your mom tells you to be careful because something could happen, you got to listen to her. And her mom's like, yeah, you do. She's like joining right in on that one. I says, yeah, you really have to listen. Because when I'm like at a Farm Bureau thing or something, I try and specify with the kids if they, if they're working in the field and they tell you to stay put right there, you've got to listen. Because they're doing this and they can't lose track of you either, but they need to trust that you're going to stay in that same spot and not move until they tell you to come forward. I try and stress that because safety, some protocols changed in Marshall County after my accident because everybody was like, okay, if there's two people in a field, somebody gets out of the tractor, you got to let each other know. And that was part of this problem. I thought he was doing one thing and he was doing another. Who wants to tell somebody I got to get out and go to the bathroom? No, I ain't doing that. I just get out and go. Didn't work out that time. Bladder controls. Really? I guess I should have wore some Depends or something. I don't know. But, God just, your life is planned out. You still have your choices. And God can take you out of your comfort zone every once in a while, which he definitely has me. I'm not a speaker, but I can tell you my story with God. And that's all it is. It's what he's done for me. He is just, between having a niece that was a stay-at-home mom, she was able to come to the house every day after the hospital, after I was home. Because this happened on day 2 of harvest. So we had a long way to go. And my husband felt a lot better knowing somebody was there in the house. And even my dog keeps an eye on me. Oh, my gosh. You'll see, if I leave the living room for too long, he'll poke his head around the corner. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I think he does that because his daddy told him, you keep an eye on Mom when I'm gone, back in the beginning, and I think he still does it. But, God puts people in your lives for a specific reason. He puts you in a place where you are supposed to be, whether you know it or not. And people watch us all the time, our attitudes, and for me, during the day, I can't even imagine how many times during the day I say, thank you, God. Whether it's I dropped my crutch and it didn't fall clear to the floor. Because for me to bend over, I literally have to just try and keep this straight and lean. Well, if I'm picking up something I don't have another arm to balance myself with. So I just have to balance and try and grab it and get myself back up. So I'm always thankful to God when whatever I drop doesn't go clear to the floor, so I don't have to bend down as far. And that's pretty much what God wants. He wants us to talk. He wants a conversation with you. He wants us to talk to him, and it doesn't matter if it's big or small. When me and my son were hiking the Appalachian Trail, when we did that hardest section, I packed the same stuff. Guess what? We were going to be working harder because we were going to be struggling up rocks. We were having to ration our trail mix because we were going to run out. So, guess what I was praying for every night? Okay, Lord, you got to get us with this trail mix. This food has to last till we get to the halfway point. Guess what he did? He brought another hiker who was only there overnight. And she's like, well, why don't I just pick the stuff up and drop it off at your halfway point? That way you've got more food. I'm like, seriously, you would do that? And she did. We got there, and we had a whole bag of food, plus Rice Krispies Squares. She stuck some extra stuff in there. I'm a farmer's wife. I cook, I bake. Never had a boughten Rice Krispies Square in my life. That thing was really good when you're starving to death. I ate it. But he even answered that little prayer. That blew me away. As soon as she said that, I thought, answer a prayer. It's not just the big stuff he wants you to converse with him about. It's the little things. It doesn't matter what it is. He just wants a fellowship with us. He wants us to talk to him, to be, ask for things, be honest. I went a long time and realized I wasn't praying for myself at all because there was people around me that needed it. And one time in church, our pastor was talking about praying for ourselves, and it dawned on me, oh my gosh, I don't pray for myself at all. I seriously didn't at that time. And I still don't do it very often unless it's like this. I always pray before I go to speak because I never know what I'm going to say. I have notes, as you can tell, I don't look at them. I don't even know why I bring them anymore. I really don't. I've never been the type of person that could just sit there and read something to you. It just as you can tell, just jumbles out from this side to this side to this side because I'm all over the place. I think God just pops the stuff in my head and says, okay, you need to tell him this. So that's what I do. But, God will carry you through anything, no matter what it is. I don't know. As long as you can trust him and talk to him every day, not just the morning prayer, not just, your prayers, but, thank you for this or whatever it is, small things. And I'd also like to encourage you before I go to cards, and I'm not doing this just because you're here. This is in this ends every speech. But cards, sending a card, whether you know somebody needs one or whether they don't. I love getting cards. I mean, come on. Who doesn't love getting a card in the mail? Instead of a bill? I love getting cards. And my mom sent a lot of them, so I also feel like it's a piece of her. But she sends me, it's still out of the blue. I'll end up getting a card. And it's just like, oh, I'm so bad. I don't send her one. I did send one for Easter, though, didn't I? I got you on that one. But it's just, anybody, whether they're in your church or not in your church, maybe they live alone, and just sending a card would brighten their day. It just, to me, that is something huge. Just your fellowship for each other is huge. And I just kind of always want to remind people to try and do that at least once a month, maybe, Send a card out to somebody. Once a week would be even better. But once a month. We can do once a month. Send a card to somebody who could use a pick-me-up or for no reason at all, whatever. I think it's good. But I appreciate you guys having me here and inviting me. Took me a while to get here, but I appreciate the second invite back. But thank you for the wonderful food, and you guys are really great. I tell you, I guess I've never been to a church I did not feel welcomed at, but I really appreciate, I never know when my last one is. I keep thinking I'm done, and then somebody else will call me up out of the blue. But thank you so much for having me and for the wonderful dinner. Definitely want that recipe. And thank you so much. And have a wonderful Mother's Day. I don't have any mothers left. She's kind of my adopted mother. But happy Mother's Day to all of you. I mean, like he said, the mothers are our backbone. Yeah. Mine could have handled this, my dad not. My dad would have cried every time he seen me, so I'm glad my parents didn't see me this way. But my father-in-law did. But at the time, my father-in-law, he was 94 and was having to wear a catheter all the time. He was complaining. He was depressed. Guess what? After my accident, he was okay. It didn't seem so bad anymore.